Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. If you're listening to this, I'm really sorry because you've obviously lost someone who's dear to you. And I wanted to talk about the first year. I lost my husband after 4 decades. And so I've been through the grief process and still working my way through it. But I wanted to do the first year because I think there's not many people who talk to you about the first year. When it first happens, you'll be in complete shock, even if you knew they were dying. When that actually happens, it's like a complete shock to you because a part of you has already dealt with it perhaps, but the other part just hasn't been able to fully deal with it, and you're going to be feeling pretty numb and pretty shocked. I used to feel like I was in some kind of nightmare, then I'd wake up and it would all be finished. But unfortunately, if I did go to sleep, when I did wake up, it was still there. And I'd have that first little bit when you woke up and you hadn't quite remembered, and then you're like, oh man, now I remember. And that's very normal, okay, that you sort of live in this other altered universe for a while. You will go to tell your partner or your loved one who you've lost something that happened during the day and then realise they're not there. I remember thinking, oh, I must ring mum about that because my mother had died, and then realising, well, I can't ring my mum about that because she's actually died. And you're going to have those moments when you're not really in the real world. There's part of you still living in the past back then. It's really, really normal, and you're not to worry about that. I found I went in and out all the time. I didn't really cope very well the first year, that's the truth of it. I mostly cried a lot and felt dreadful, and everything was affected. I couldn't eat, lost a lot of weight, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't focus. I was putting things in all the wrong places. I'd find the cheese in the cupboard and the sauce in the freezer and all crazy things like this. That, like, I was disconnected, and I think that's really normal too. So if you find that you're doing little crazy things, paying the wrong account, you get the gas bill, but you'll end up trying to pay the electricity bill because you've gone to the wrong account, or you go to the wrong bank places because you're a little bit distracted and you're really not coping with the grief. It feels like you're in this huge, big, black place. That's what it feels like. And people are talking to you, but it's almost like you're in glass, like in this big fog. The other thing I noticed is that after a few months, when I look back, I couldn't remember stuff. I'd have to ask people, did I do that, or did that happen, or did they come over? I actually didn't really remember things, and I think it was just the shock and not getting enough sleep, not eating well. And if that happens to you, you're not really going nuts. It's just part of the grief. It's very normal for the first year to be very, very foggy. It feels like a fogginess, like you're living in this big fog and this isn't really happening to you, but you know it is happening to you and you haven't come to grips with it. If you need to retreat. If you can't go to the party because you always used to go to the party, or if you can't go to the grave this week, it's okay. You're going to have to do what you can do. And remember, no one else is going through exactly what you're going through, and therefore the normal people who aren't dealing with the loss of somebody can do all these things. But right now you're not really in that place, and I don't want you to force yourself to do it. If you can't go, you don't feel like it, you don't have to go. It doesn't matter what people think. They're not the one who has to show up and then land up outside in the car park crying and not being able to come back. I remember I was at someone's house and I didn't go to the wedding because it was the day before the anniversary of when my husband died, and I knew I was going to be a mess. And then the next time I saw these people, they put the video on of the wedding, and I thought I'd be all right. And I was sitting there, and in the end I just had to say to the lady, I'm sorry, you're going to have to switch this off. I can't watch this, because it was so emotional for me to see the wedding, and it brought everything up for me about our wedding, and I had to ask her to switch it off. And she was kind, she switched it off. You're going to have many of those moments, and it's very, very normal. And in that first year, your ability to cope with things will be really pretty poor. If you can get people to do lots of things for you to help you, you just let them help you. Often people can see that we're not functioning well, and they just sort of take over and fill out the form, or ring up the man, or cancel the subscription, whatever you have to do. And you will find that you will seem all right until you have to speak to the Telstra, we call it Telstra guy, but it's in Australia, but say speak to the phone guy and change his phone account, and then you'll end up crying on the phone. I cried everywhere. I cried at the bank, I cried at the supermarket, I cried on the phone, I cried when people came to the door. I was just crying all the time. I was really surprised that there weren't many more people crying at the shops, because a lot of those people had lost somebody. So don't worry about that. It's very normal to cry all the time. I remember on Christmas Day, the first Christmas, I was outside and I was crying. I was trying to do a painting actually, and in the end it was my son, actually came out and said, "Mum, forget it. You can't even see what you're doing, just come inside." So you'll find you'll try to soldier on, but you won't be successful, and that's okay. In the first year too, there's a lot of changes within your lifestyle. People maybe that you thought would be there are hiding away from you because they don't know what to do with you really. People you never thought would come forward have come forward and are sending you text messages and just checking up on you all the time, or popping in and dropping off things. Your expectation of people and your thought how it would be isn't like it is, and some people sort of fade out, and actually some of them actually kind of go, and then other people really come in close, and they're often people that you didn't expect that they would come in close. So just be grateful that they did. You'll also find in the one family, everyone deals with it differently. Some people don't want to talk about it. Some people want to talk about it all the time. Some people are really, really angry about it, and so they're really hard to live with. And some people just fall into deep depression. You will be living this life, and this will be happening to you and around you, because everyone does grief in different ways. If you want to go to a grief place, like a little group, do that. I tried one online because I also wanted to write a book on grief, which I've done, because I wanted to write like a real book, and I'll put that on my other channel. But what I'm saying to you is, if you go to the grief place and it makes you feel worse, you don't have to go anymore. I was on the grief site. It was so depressing. And people were saying things, and it was my first year, and they were going like, it's 10 years and I still haven't got over it, and I'm still not coping. And I'm thinking, oh my God, will that be me? So I found it was quite a negative thing. However, I did meet somebody who's going through what I was going through, and we've become great friends in the last 5 years. So there are good things that come from it as well. People will also give you a lot of advice in the first year. Be really wary of that. If you're not sure, don't sell your house, don't sell your car, don't change banks, don't, do all the things that don't travel if you don't feel like it. People were telling me to sort of travel and go on cruises, and I'm like, I can barely get out of bed in the morning. I can't even get to a cruise boat. They mean so well, and they want to help you, but because they're not where you are, they'll say things to you that, you'll just think a little bit crazy for where you're at emotionally. And that's the whole thing. You are heartbroken. You are broken. Your heart's just broken into pieces, and now you just have to try and stick the pieces back together. That's what you're doing. So while you're doing that, don't put pressure on yourself. If you need counselling, if you need to go to a psychologist, if you need to go to the doctor, if you need medication to get you through that, do whatever you can to get through that first year. The first year is a nightmare, I think. It's kind of like being in this. I always think the first year is like going down the rapids, and by the time you get to the second year, there's not as many rapids, but the first year is very difficult. And you're also going to have the first year of everything. So the first year of the birthdays, the Mother's Days, the Easter, the Christmas, you're going to have all those to go through the first time. And if you just want to stay home and stay in bed and watch TV that day, and you don't want to go anywhere, it's okay. You don't have to please other people. Remember, they're not living your nightmare. You're living the nightmare, so you do whatever works for you. I want to tell you that the first year is very, very hard. I think those first 3 to 6 months are tough, but hang in there, because it does get kind of better. It's not like better in that you feel great all of a sudden. It's more like you become better at dealing with it. You become more used to it. You do miss them extremely hard the first year, I feel. You really ache and miss the person, because your whole lifestyle's changed. And that's what I want you to understand, that you get better at living a life without them. I'm not saying you're happy about it, but you do get better at living down here in the world without them in their physical form. Take care of yourself the first year. It's tough. It's really tough. And I don't think people really talk about it. And when you go out, everybody sort of kind of, how you going? And you say, okay. And they go, oh, that's good. And sometimes that's just about all you're going to get. So if you need to get help, really get it, because it won't come from the places you might have expected. And you will get through this. I'm up to year 5 now, and that's why I'm going to do my yearly podcast. Like, I'm going to do them in the next few days, actually, about the different years and how they were. And also to give you hope. You'll get through it. You will. You will heal. You'll learn how to live without that other person. And honestly, they always live inside your heart. It is true. And they always live inside your memories. And they're always feeling close to you, really. It's just that in the physical world, you don't have them anymore, and that's pretty sad. I'm proud of you. You're doing okay. Even on the days when you think you're doing really badly, all you're doing is feeling it. That's what the first year is like, the shock and the numbness, and then the coming out the numbness and the starting to feel like this is actually real. And that's very, very strong towards the end of the first year, where you start to go like, oh my God, that did happen. It is real. I didn't just nightmare it. Keep plodding on. Don't give up. And it will, bit by bit, month by month, you'll get better at dealing with it, and you'll get to accept it more, and you'll find ways to deal with it, really, in your everyday life. That's the thing, to find ways how to maneuver around it. But the most important person, if you're going through it, is you right now, and you have to put yourself first, not what other people want or listen to what are people telling you to do. You know how you feel. You know what you can and can't do, and they're not going through it, and thank God they're not for them, but you are. So listen. I usually say, yeah, okay, I'll go away and look at that, I'll go away and think about that. And then sometimes I've done it, and then sometimes I've thought, that's the dumbest idea I ever heard. So it's okay to think that, but don't say it. You can get through it. That's why I'm doing the podcast. You can get through this. 5 years on, I got through it, and I basically lost the love of my life. So you can get through this, and it will get easier. It will get easier. I promise you, it will get easier. So don't give up. Just allow yourself to have the really crappy days, and if you have to stay home for 3 days in your pajamas and cry all the time, you just do that, because honestly, you won't cry tears that aren't inside you. And the more you love them, the more the buckets of tears will be there. So you just cry them out, and you let them go out, and just think, every time you cry, don't think I'm weak, just think, okay, that's less in the bucket. That's less that I have to cry about. That's less. And that will help you a lot, I think. So I'll be talking to you soon. And remember, you don't have to be strong all the time, but you're going to feel it. So don't think that's a weakness to feel it. To have loved somebody and to have lost them is, I think, the greatest devastation that we have emotionally down here. And even though we know they're going to die, we always know people are going to die. When it actually happens, it's a completely different story. So take care of yourself, and I'm sending you lots of love and lots of healing, and know that you're not alone.